Araw-gabi, ako lang nagbabantay, wala sa akin tumutulong. Hindi ako man sa araw, nagsusuka ako. Hindi ko kaya. Pagdating ko doon sa kwarto, andun na yung social welfare. Tinanong ako kung binabayaran ako, kung nakakababas ako, kung ilang araw ako nagtatrabaho, kung regular ang pagkain ko at saka pagtulog. Bakit sila nandito? Wala naman akong ginagawang masama. Wala man akong pinatay na tao. Ang sabi ng dalawa, just go with me. Don't argue.
Time. Each tick, minute, hour, day is time lost.
Time is money, and lost time adds up fast. But imagine working and living in captivity for 60 years. You could consider that as a lifetime that was stolen.
At 83 years old, Fedalina could never get back the last 65 years. One of 5 children, she lost both of her parents when she was 12 years old. To make ends meet, she moved from the Philippine province of Leyte to Manila, where she found work as a domestic helper for a middle-class family. It's a common practice in the Philippines, but this turned out to be no ordinary job. At first, she was given a roof and a small salary to care for the family. But as time passed, the conditions worsened. More work, verbal and physical abuse, and her salary eventually shrinking into nothing. With not much formal education and nowhere to go, Fedalina didn't have many options. "12 years passed. The family whom Fedalina served brought her to America in the 1970s, where she was cut off from her own family.
Tumawag yung aking pamangkin dahil nangungumusta. Nung sinagot yung telepono, sabi niya, sinong kausap mo? Sabi ko, yung pamangkin ko nangungumusta. Bakit? Nanihingi ba ng pera? Ay, hindi naman hinihingi, nangungumusta lang. Sabi sa akin, ibaba mo ang telepono at wala kang ibabayad. Binaba ko, hindi kami nakapag-usap. Hindi na tumawag uli yung pamangkin. Dahil pinagbawalan ako sumagot ng telepono.
The work and abuse followed her into this new land.
Nalagaan ko yung anak niya. Ang kapatid, dahil dalawa lang sila, panay babae. Nalagaan ko yung kapatid niya dahil may hita, may asma. Yung nanay hindi na kaya mag-akyat baba dahil ang bahay nila ang taas. Hindi na kaya manaog, akyat baba. Kaya ako ang kinuha. Sila na masahe. Sila mag-ina. Pero itong panganay, wala siyang gasta. Pinaliwanag sa akin ng nanay niya at kapatid. Ngayon, nung mamatay ang nanay niya rito at saka kapatid, siya naman hindi makalakad dahil may diabetes.
The next 40 years, she was locked up in silence. No identification, no communication with her own family, and nowhere to go in a country she didn't know much about.
Araw-gabi, ako lang nagbabantay, wala sa akin tumutulong.
Walang bayad din.
Wala.
Sumisigaw sila sa'yo?
Minumura pa ako, sabi niya, putang ina mo. 2 oras lang gigisingin ka. Kakain siya, pupunta sa banyo, ay hindi naman siya makatayo. Dahil yung paa niya, paa ng bata, maliit. Ang sapatos niya, size 2. Pagkain ko, kinukontrol, hindi man ako binibigyan ng pera. Pag binigyan ako ng pera ng pamangkin niya, sasabihin, alam ko, binibigyan ka ng pera ng pamangkin ko. Mabait yung pamangkin niya. Sabi niya, bakit kayo galit na galit sa kanya? Wala namang ginagawa. Teacher yung anak dito, nagtuturo siya rito sa Amerika. Minsan sinasama ako, naglilinis ako ng kwarto niya. Maalis kami ng bahay, alas 5 ng madaling araw pagdating namin doon sa eskwela. Tinatakot ako.
Talaga?
Ang sabi sa akin, pag oras na lumabas ka ng pinto, nandyan yung pulis, pupusasan ka.
This was the only life she knew. It's the land of the free, but beneath the hustle and bustle, there is a dark side of America. Slavery continues to exist.
Was brought here to the United States, worked for less than $200 a month and wasn't always paid. She's been separated from her. Over the last 3 years especially, Filipino Workers Center has been doing, our program against human trafficking has been growing and growing. And it's really because we've been finding the need. So there's more and more victims that we've been identifying.
Slavery is an epidemic that goes unnoticed even by those who are shackled.
It's a concrete case that this is happening around the corner in our neighborhood still. There's still a lot of education to be done because there are a lot of human trafficking survivors that don't realize that they are victims and that there are actually resources and ways to transition out of their situation, or even if it's something in the past, to be able to recognize that they are survivors and that there are also resources for them and still possible T visas or other types of relief.
International Labor Organization and Walk Free Foundation estimates 40 million people live in slavery worldwide. The Global Slavery Index believes that 400,000 people in America live enslaved.
Human trafficking is a global phenomenon. There's a lot of people who do not report it, and we only learn about it when we rescue someone or when they actively report it themselves. But even for law enforcement and for government agencies like us, it's hard for us to track and monitor all the cases because it's really under the radar, and it's even difficult to identify victims and identify that it is human trafficking.
Southern California is considered as one of the largest hubs for human trafficking. Human rights groups and local and foreign governments have all taken steps to combat the epidemic. The Filipino Workers Center as well as the Philippine Consulate are just a couple of the Southern California groups identifying and assisting human trafficking victims, especially those who come from the Philippines. There is no shortage in unique cases, from sex trafficking, recruiters deceiving workers, or even a lonely domestic helper in a middle-class suburban home like Fedalina.
They come here under an H-2B or a temporary work visas, and then the employer promises them a longer term, but they do not know the immigration law, so they get exploited. In most cases also, they think that family or that person brought them here, so they have that debt of gratitude to that person. They don't want to prosecute the person. They just want to report it because they don't want to see that person get in jail. They don't want that person to suffer. So it's hard also for the victims.
The methods are similar: confiscating documents, round-the-clock work for little or no pay, physical, verbal, emotional abuse, and isolation. Any promise of a decent day's pay is instead fulfilled with threats.
You can't believe that it is still happening even in this day and age. You don't realize that there are a lot of Filipinos being victimized by traffickers or fellow Filipinos as well. So it's kind of struck you that why are you doing this to your fellow Filipino?
Fedalina lived 6 decades, serving 4 generations and at least a dozen family members, eventually into possession of her original employer's daughter, a retired school teacher. On a day she accompanied her sickly trafficker to the hospital, it was Fedalina who found a remedy to the slave epidemic through the alertness of a stranger.
Isang linggo kami doon sa ospital. Ako nagbabantay. Kasi yung anak ayaw pumunta. Ngayon, ako nakatabi sa nanay niya. Di ngayon, hindi nagdala ng pagkain yung manugang niyang Amerikano. Ayun, hindi ako man isang araw. Nagsusuka ako. Ngayon, hindi ko kaya. Dinala ako sa ibaba. Kinuha ko ng mga doon na sa taas, binaba ako. Pagdating ko doon, tinignan lahat ito, nagyan. Sabi ng nurse, hindi ika mabuti. Ang mo, diswas yun. Ngayon, kailangan mo ika, tulungan ka ng social welfare. Tumawag yung nurse. Ako hindi ko alam. Nakagaon pa ako, sabi ng nurse. Halika, mamamasyal tayo. Sabi ko, saan? Basta sumama ka sa akin. Pagdating ko doon sa kwarto, andun na yung social welfare. Tinanong ako kung binabayaran ako, kung nakakababas ako, kung ilang araw ako nagtatrabaho, kung regular ang pagkain ko at saka pagtulong.
Anong sabi mo sa ganun?
Nagsinungaling ako eh. Hindi naniwala ang social welfare. Sinira yung pinto sa garahe. Sabi ng alaga ko, ano ba yun? Sabi ko, aba, ewan ko. Andito tayong dalawa sa loob. Pagbukas ko ng pinto sa kusina, hilihibira sila. Apat na kutsi. Lalaki, babae. Tapos, pumanik na sa taas.
You don't really see the human trafficking as a crime happening immediately because it's a hidden crime. You'll just learn the story afterwards. So it's very important for people to be aware of other people and be able to report when something wrong is happening.
Kung di na sombong, andun pa rin ako hanggang ngayon.
Umaga po! Nice to see you again!
Kumusta ho?
Mabuti naman po.
Malaking utang na loob ko sa inyo.
It's now Nanay's turn to be cared for. Federal agents, the Philippine government, and the PWC have come together to help Nanay's transition into freedom.
Malaking utang ko dun sa tatlo. Kung hindi sila, hindi ko alam kung saan ako pupulutin. Kaya maraming papasalamat ako. Hindi ko rin alam nga, doon ako babagsak kaila Malu. Hindi ko alam. Wala akong kamalay-malay. Nung nakarating na ako, nakahinga ako ng maluag.
Ginano nyo dahil mga laki nakatritay.
Human trafficking is a crime that can carry a 20-year prison sentence.
Dahil sa inyo, hindi ako ganito. Utang ko sa inyo ang buhay ko. Sa inyo lahat yung mga tumulong.
Well, it may have been 4 generations that benefited from Nanay's enslavement. Only one person was implicated, eventually settling into a plea deal in where they admitted that she knowingly obtained the labor of Fedalina by means of force and the threats for at least a 6-year span. The plea deal prohibits the defendants' names from being publicly released.
Naiyak ako sa tuwa. Masaya ako dahil nandito kayo lahat.
On the day her trafficker was to be sentenced, Nanay granted something that none of them ever gave her: freedom.
Ipakukulong sana ng diyan. Pero ako, sinabi ko, no, I will not do that to him. Ang sabi ng judge, napakabait mo. Ginawa ka na hindi mabuti. Hindi trinato ka ng hindi mabuti. Pinatawad mo pa rin siya. Ang akin naman, ang Diyos nagpatawad. Ako pa kaya, tao lamang. Sinabi ko yun sa judge, it's okay, I don't want to go to jail. I forgive him. Sabi ko sa judge. Pinagalitan siya ng judge.
Fedalina's elderly wheelchair-bound captors sentenced to house arrest, and she was awarded $100,000 in restitution. It may not pay back all the time she lost to bondage, nor is the money guaranteed to last very long, especially in the high-cost region of California.
Cheers! Cheers for Nanay!
A case is closed, a life has ended naturally, and a new life begins.
Papasalamat ako. Nagtagumpay ako sa aking hangarin.
Oh! Cheers! Cheers!
Ang mga lasingga.
At 83 years old, everything for Nanay is a first. From a stroll along the pier, to opening a bank account.
Ilalagay ko lang yung information niya sa system.
Each step, a chance to slowly reclaim her identity and walk among the free.
Gusto ko ang makatulong sa mga nagtatrabaho din sa mga inaapi ng mga amo. Kaya ako ngayon, andito, masaya na ako, maligaya ako, nakahinga ako ng maluwag dahil malayang-malaya na ako. Masusunod ko ang gusto ko, maski saan ako pumunta. Dahil wala na ako doon sa mga taong umapi sa akin.
Navigating the social services system can be overwhelming, especially for someone who's lived in isolation.
A lot of it is like, how do I again get back control about my own decisions, about my own life? And so it's like, how can we do that in a supported way? So, so now can decide what are the things that are important in your life and what do you want to do. And you don't have to do what other people say, that really your life is your own.
And she's now securing legal status with a trafficking visa as the community tries to raise money for her day-to-day needs.
Well, it's step by step. First, it's making sure that all the basics are taken care of, because that's not easy too. Just thinking about housing, if you think about how expensive housing is right now, finding a good housing situation where there's community support as well, because isolation is another thing that you don't want. You want to have a space where they can be independent, but also surrounded by a supportive community. And a lot of times human trafficking survivors are not able to jump into the workforce either, because of all of the trauma that they've been through. And some of those who have jumped back into the workforce, we've seen like re-victimize right away because they're still so vulnerable. So it's taking care of all of the different things to try and make them not as vulnerable, have the basic needs met, and then how do you build community? Step by step, like learning how to ride the buses, right?
Yeah.
That was one thing, one step of independence and freedom.
We're still processing her legal assistance for her next steps, because I think for Nanay, it's really reintegrating back into the society, because she has been in that cage for so long. So I think the struggle for her is how to rebuild her life. It must be overwhelming too, but exciting as well.
Ate Nina! Ate Nina!
Hi, how are you? I miss you. I miss you so much.
Laki ka na, oh, lumaki ka na, tumaba ka na.
Maraming tumulong sa akin. Kinukupak ko nila. Hindi ako nagbayad. Pinakain ako nila. Wala akong ginastan pera. Ang babait nila sa PWC. Kaya papasalamat ako sa kanila lahat. Wala akong tulak kabigin. Lalo na yung nagtatrabaho sa FBI.
For decades, she has endured abuse and really, being confined. It's really modern day slavery that she endured, and she had the courage to leave that, even if she didn't have any connection to any family members, even if she had been there for so long. She actually had the courage to step out and to speak up against her employer. So she actually won her case in a hearing this year.
Now as a survivor, she wants to share her story, hoping it can inspire others to break their own chains.
Gusto ko nga makatulong sa mga taong nagtatrabaho dito. Lahat-lahat yung mga Pilipinang inaapi ng mga pinagtatrabahuan. Kailangan lakasan yung loob nyo. Huwag kayong lumaban. Huminahon kayo at saka pabayaan silang magalit. Kung di nyo na kaya, humingi kayo ng tulong.
Decades after a family in Manila cut her off from her own siblings, she's been cut off from the defendants for her safety. While the plea deal prevents the defendants from being named, many of the defendants' family members had distanced themselves from her during the prosecution. But even if Nanay spent a majority of her life with them, they were never her family. She considers the grassroots group that gave her a new life as her family, especially a few of her fellow chainbreakers.
Absolutely, she has a family because we are her family, she's our family. No matter what, we're gonna be taking care of Nanay, but we do want to help her to connect if she wants to. Look for her family in the Philippines that she got ripped away from, yeah.
I have no family.
Never been in love, never had her own children, but nowadays she's well loved by the staff at the care center where she's been living at. It's now her turn to get round-the-clock care and companionship. Not even the hands of justice could turn back the hands of time, but with a newfound life and unwavering attitude, whatever remaining time Nanay has, she intends to make it the time of her life.
She has regained her freedom. She has lost contact with her family. But she is here with us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all please stand up and welcome our beloved Nanay Fedalina. Nanay Fedalina, so many people here in this room love you. We will always be here to help you and support you.
Your first part?
First time in my life. Papasalamat ako sa inyo sa mga tulong nyo sa akin. Kung hindi dahil sa inyo, wala akong ganitong kasayahan. Kaya maraming salamat sa mga tulong nyo. Lahat kayo rito. Mahal ko kayo. Hindi ko kayo makakalimutan. Utang ko sa inyo ang buhay ko.